Tell us about Ronald Reagan and Utah.
But I think he was, there's a lot of question about Utah and should we elect a president. I think that a lot of people have a lot of interest in the things that transpire in Utah and the way we do things. And I think they often like the way things are, and I think Reagan felt comfortable being in Utah, that the people, if I can say, were real. They didn't put on particular airs. I think they treated him very respectfully. I remember sitting on the stage at BYU with Senator Garn and Senator Hatch, waiting for the president to come in and give a speech, and it was well received. I could tell you some stories about our personal conversations that day, but they're not appropriate for here. But I think there's an affinity that Utah is a good barometer. It's a very Republican state, very conservative state, and we still balance our budgets here. And I think that could have been the draw, but I really don't know from a personal standpoint what attracted him to Utah.
I was a party chairman in Utah in 1968 when we invited Ronald Reagan to come address our convention. That was the year we were looking at nominating a candidate for president. Richard Nixon was the front runner at that time. Ronald Reagan got up and gave a speech, and he just mesmerized the audience. I mean, he just took it over. In fact, the Nixon people were mad at me. They called me aside. Dick, what the hell did you invite him for, you know? They were unhappy, but he took over. The delegates in the state of Utah and the Utah people have loved him ever since.
I grew up in Southern California, and my dad's best friend was Governor Reagan's driver. So as a high school student, I used to go in the limo to high school, which was a kind of a fun opportunity for a kid. Actually worked in your special election when you were elected and walked out there, Senator Harmer. But you know, it's interesting. Reagan spent a lot of time in Utah. He made 9 trips here starting in '68. I don't know how many trips he made here, maybe as an actor or doing Death Valley days, but as a politician, he made 9 trips here as a candidate or someone who came and spoke to the state conventions or to visit BYU. He did that on 2 occasions that I'm aware of. And he just had an affinity with the people. Going through the files of the Deseret News, I found over 900 photographs of him, showing him just enjoying the people of Utah and the people of Utah enjoying him. And I think that the funnest one that I think most people all remember, and I know Senator Garn and Jim, I think Hansen was there, is when they brought in that elephant in 1980 to the convention, and I think it surprised him, and he came up there and shook hands with the trunk, and it was captured in film, and it's just a great image.
I asked him one day, we were talking about welfare reform, and I said, have you ever been to an LDS bishop's storehouse? He said, what is that? So I told him, and he said, I'd like to go. So a few days later, we went out to the LDS bishop's storehouse in Sacramento. He had scheduled 30 minutes to be there. We went inside. There were people that were doing tomatoes. And he went down the line, shook hands with everybody, and asked what they were doing, who they were. And then we sat down, and the 30 minutes was over. But his driver came in and said, Governor, we need to leave. And he said, call Helene, that was the secretary, tell her to cancel my appointments this afternoon. He stayed for 2.5 hours, listening, learning. The point of the story is that in staff meetings after that, he didn't want to say the Mormons, so he would say, now in Utah, they do it this way. And he always equated that experience with Utah. But repeatedly, many times, when the issue of welfare came up, he would go back to that experience and would talk about it and say, that's what we've got to do for the people of California.
Tell us something about Ronald Reagan that we don't know.
The first bill I ever introduced as a freshman was one about Presidential Commission on Drunk Driving. I went to see him, he liked the idea. And to make a long story short, he said, we're going to present this to the United States. We're going to do it on the east side of the White House on the lawn. So they invited all those people who would be interested in it. It was his deal. So I was asked to go down there and sit next to him. And I got up on the dais and there was no president there. And Jim Baker said, get up and jazz this crowd up a little bit. The president can't come there. Gee, there were about 1,000 people there of all kinds of heads of everything. So I got up and I was pontificating. In about 5 minutes, he grabbed me by the arm and he said, I'll take over, which he did, and he explained it all. Being kind of an impetuous young congressman, I stood up and said, where were you? And he says, well, I was on the phone. And I was talking to Margaret Thatcher, and she just bombed the Falkland Islands. And I thought that was a little more important than coming to this.
To give you another example, one of these trips here, he said, Jake, is there anything else I can do for you while I'm here? We'd finished all of the public meetings. And I said, well, there's something that's very important to me, and that is a children's hospital, primary children's hospital. And he said, would you like to take me up to see it? And all of his staff was president, the planes waiting and so on. And he went like this and said, would you take me up there? And I said yes. And he went up to primary, went through the wards, shook hands with little kids and patted babies on the head and so on. And he spent about 45 minutes up there going through primary children's hospital. I can't emphasize enough the personal side of Ronald Reagan, not President Reagan, the human being. What an amazing person he was.
I was an advance man. I started with Nixon and finished off with Bush in 2008. But I remember going on election night, the night he was elected President of the United States. And a friend of mine, Bob Weinberger, who was a nephew of Caspar Weinberger, we were up there and we got ourselves all the way up to just below the penthouse when we heard, at the Century Plaza, when we heard that he had won. So we thought we better get ourselves down to the ballroom to see the president-elect to accept his election. And so we pushed the elevator button and waiting there, and the door opens, and there, standing before us, is Ronald Reagan, Ed Meese, Cap Weinberger, and the Secret Service and the elevator operator hadn't pushed the stop button, so they'd bypass all the floors, and it opened up. And Reagan is standing there, and I'm looking at him, and I'm saying, congratulations, and he says, well, come on in. And I saw Cap Weinberger in the back, seeing his nephew, shaking his head in just sheer fear, saying, no. But to be elected president and to have that opportunity to see those doors open, and being an advance man, you know, I always was with him and traveled and set up beforehand, but it was a mechanical job, and you really didn't have a lot of contact with these people. But he was always, when I was around him, genuine, friendly, and kind.